this is the only Colony episode that I never included in my Carnivorous projects, mainly the fact that it had nothing to do with her relationship with Steven. Which for me personally, it feels awkward to think about that we reached to a point where I'm actually going to be talking about this episode for this marathon. But this also brings up on the fact that once I get into Season 5, there was more of a reason onto why Colony should have been with Steven and Lars in Gem Homewards, but I've already described that in my fourth part of the Carnivorous episodes. The new Crystal Gems takes place during the events where Steven and the Crystal Gems are in outer space, and Connie appears inside of Steven's house, which leads to her encountering Peridot and Lapis for the first time, and with her trying to feel like Steven by protecting Beach City, she becomes Steven, Lapis becomes Amethyst, and Peridot becomes Garnet, and Pumpkin becomes Pearl. And the biggest objective in this episode is to do a car wash, considering that Greg isn't here at Beach City to do the car washing. Honestly, this episode has a basic premise, but since the main focus centers around the interactions of Colony, Peridot, and Lapis, to tell you the truth, I can instantly forgive this episode for taking that direction. For the longest time, I viewed this episode as the first non-Steven episode, but similar to the Greg episodes centering around his youth as an adult, where he tells the stories towards Steven, is literally the same thing as what Connie is doing by telling her story towards Steven. Honestly, there are so many ways to make an episode that's not focusing Steven, but at the same time, this also proves that it's really unavoidable to make an episode that doesn't star Steven. But with that out of the way, with this episode centering around Connie being Steven, Peridot being Garnet, and Lapis being Amethyst, and Pumpkin being Pearl, to tell you the truth, they're really trying to be like the real Crystal Gems when it comes to role-playing as the real Crystal Gems, and this is supposed to be a homage to the Season 1 episodes, but at the same time, you can really tell that they can't be able to communicate completely when it comes to being the characters that they're role-playing as. And the difference is that even though that they're still role-playing, they're still doing missions involving cleaning cars at Greg's car wash. And considering it's difficult for Peridot and Lapis to get along by doing these missions legitimately for a heart, similar to the Crystal Gems, I think it kind of shows that what Connie learned from this episode, it's just way more difficult for me to take her character seriously on the fact that she didn't take that lesson to heart when she mainly ignored or shunned Steven when he came back from Gem Homeworld. When Connie tries to be like Steven, she really learned that it was a lot more difficult to be Steven, even though that her development towards Steven is literally the driving point of how her character was improved as each season passes. So when we get into the 5th season, I just find it difficult to actually see her in the position of her shunning Steven out, not realizing that what Steven went through in outer space is a lot more complicated. And for me personally, having her include with Steven's journey along with Lars to Gem Homeworld should have been more of her development to understand how serious the situation is, considering of how low developed she was in Season 5. Yes, this episode is supposed to be goofy and charming when it comes to Peridot and Lapis' interactions with each other, but when it comes to the moral, since that this didn't take to heart completely in Season 5, I just don't even understand how it's difficult for me to overlook it, considering of how Connie was still entertaining in this episode. Let me tell you that if I didn't do the Carnivorous episodes and actually did those reviews for this marathon, I would probably really pay attention to Connie's character a lot more when it comes to how she's portrayed. And after watching this episode, even it's a Beach City episode, it still has development involving Connie's character, and the fact that she's portrayed differently in season 5 just makes it a lot more difficult for me to take her separation from Steven seriously, for how I really wanted this whole thing to be sorted out completely. As far as I'm concerned, with her being absent, there was a lot of missed opportunities, to the point that I still couldn't be able to enjoy Jungle Moon due to thinking about how poorly executed Connie was in season 5. Believe me, the Carnivores were an early project of mine whenever I think about Steven Universe when I was new to the franchise, but believe me, just because I made those Carnivores reviews way earlier, that doesn't automatically mean that they're outdated in comparison to my analysis video of Change Your Mind and the finale of Future, mainly the 4-part finale. Because to tell the truth, my opinions on Steven and Connie still remain the same, mainly the fact that I still enjoy their dynamic, but at the same time, judging of how that the season 5 episodes were a huge mixed bag for me, this episode really taught me a lot more that my point still stands strong, considering that Connie just forgot everything in this episode. Well, it's just mainly her just being Steven, while Peridot is being like Garnet, Lapis is being like Amethyst, and Pumpkin is just being like Paul. To be real, the biggest downgrade to this episode is that I'm focusing on the moral that Connie didn't learn up until season 5, more on the fact that she, along with Lapis and Peridot and Pumpkin, are trying to be like the Crystal Gems, but they didn't turn out like the Crystal Gems. Trust me when I say this, the more I look into these episodes, the more I realize that they aged the same as before, but at the same time there was this one element that holds it back that makes me question a lot more in future episodes, mainly season 5. I'm giving this episode a 7.5 out of 10.